try the Stepanko interview again. So if you're looking forward to the interview, don't go anywhere. We'll try again after checking out this move by Magnus.
And here's the fascinating thing. You remember when he went d5, the moving the pawn out to clear the square that it formerly occupied. It's the same exact idea, just on a different square. That pawn on e5, what piece would like to get onto that square? Absolutely the knight. So he's, get out of here, I want that knight on e5. So f takes e6, knight e5 is the idea. And now, remember I mentioned this pin, f3 becomes a very serious threat. So this knight on e4, which seemed unassailable, now gets under a lot of fire. Now we can see the computer does give an edge for black, but minus 0.4, that's not a very meaningful edge. I love this decision from a practical standpoint. And this really puts Alireza in the ringer. He's gonna have to find some very precise play in this position. Maybe you go back to f6, maybe it's as simple as that. But I think Magnus does see something here, and I'll be really interested to see what happens.
And I think Magnus is also someone who can smell blood. Like, I think Alireza, it's quite, we see the leg shaking under the table there.
Oh, yeah.
And Magnus is someone, I think he really senses, you know, when he sees any sign of, I don't want to say a sign of weakness, but if he sees anything, some kind of nerves, hesitation, you know, he is really like a shark. That a good
No, it is. He smelled the blood. I think that's exactly what it is. And you know, some people looking at the evaluation and saying it's a blunder. Well, I wouldn't put too much stock in the computer eval here. Remember, they are humans, and this is a very complex position. Everybody's prone to mistakes in these positions.
And it's also, once again, what we touched upon just a few minutes ago, that Magnus, he does take risk, but it's usually quite calculated risk. Like, usually, you know, it's very likely that he has assessed this and thought, okay, I'll try, but in the worst case, I should still be able to keep the position in equalish waters. Like, I am taking a risk, but I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket.
Completely agree. I think that's very well said. And, well, shall we have another go at the Stepanko interview?
Absolutely, let's try. So let's see.
Right.
Andrei Stepanko after his draw against Jan-Krzysztof Duda.
Andrei, the first time on the main stage in Back and Say. How was the experience?
I feel very great, and I'm expecting a very tough tournament against strong players like Magnus Carlsen, and it's my favorite player, I think. So it would be great to play against him and others.
You didn't play him before?
No, only online, I think. Bullet games.
Okay, but they are less intense in a way.
Sorry?
Intense, like... I mean, to lose a bullet game is not that bad, but a classical game might be terrible. I mean, it gives a much more negative feeling.
It's not terrible to lose him, I think, because he's
okay, but to lose a bullet game, that doesn't spoil your day.
Yes.
A classical game, it spoils the day, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so and all these measures against COVID in the tournament hall, did they bother you?
I don't think so, because we are all at the same conditions, so I think it's not a big problem.
Okay, very good. And today's game, can you say something about it?
Yes.
Were you better at some point?
Maybe right after the opening, I had a bit better position, but I think I made a mistake by playing knight e5, because I missed the line when he took my knight, and after knight e4, I think, yeah, and after that I think it's just equal.
Okay, thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you.
So there we heard it from Andrei Yasipenko, who is looking forward to meeting his favorite player, Magnus Carlsen. They have never played in a classical game before. And what a great opportunity for Andrei Yasipenko, only 18 years old, to be playing here in the Masters group in Vaikanse.
Absolutely. And he'll get to play his idol and his hero. He'll definitely come all guns blazing for that game. And we see basically all of the players coming all guns blazing to this first round of the TATA Steil. And we've been keeping an eye on the two familiar faces in front of you, Magnus Carlsen against Alireza Firouzja. Magnus now sacrificing a second pawn. He's currently 2 pawns down, but his compensation is very evident. He's got very active pieces. And he currently threatens to win Black's knight with the move f3. The ball is in Alireza's court. Will he find accurate defense? And it appears that he has. He has gone queen f6. We talked about this move. This gets the queen out of the pin, and it counterpins White's knight, and I think this game might end in a pretty quick draw. I think Magnus basically has to fizzle out here.
So can you show us what is the best way for Magnus if he decided, okay, that was enough risk for today, Alireza has defended well. If he wanted things to fizzle out, what's the best way to go on about it?
Well, I think that, Magnus is the one who has to worry slightly about fizzling out. I think bishop takes c4 is possible, and then knight takes c6. And basically the knight defends the queen, which is important. So rook takes c6 is forced, and now queen takes c4. So this is the sort of position where you might look at it and say, well, Black's much better. He's got an extra pawn. But the reality is Black's king is very, very weak because of this deficiency in the pawn structure. In my experience, realistic winning chances in a position like this are almost nil, because in addition to everything else, White is going to infiltrate to the 7th rank. And I think this gives White plenty of activity to secure the draw. In fact, Black will eventually have to just fizzle out here. So I'm actually kind of anticipating, now Magnus has played f3, but the reason I thought this move might be inaccurate is because of knight to g5. And, now if you take on c6, then rook takes c6, and everything is protected. White could end up 2 pawns down. So this is really interesting.
Yeah, Magnus taking a bit more risk here than I thought he would. About Magnus, it has to be said, he just arrived yesterday in Vaikanse. He was apparently on holidays in the Seychelles. I'm not sure exactly if that's where he flew from, but it could be that Magnus is fresh of a long trip, maybe some jet lag. Mm-hmm. So all of that combined with the... I feel that Magnus, when he plays Alireza, there's always a little extra something, because I really feel that, they've had this rivalry, not rivalry, but online they've played a lot. Alireza has beaten him in the final of the Bantam Blitz Cup, it was. I think so. They've had some potentially the next big challenger, and all of that could weigh at the back of Magnus's mind.
Without a doubt, he certainly wants to make a statement and hitting the bishop. But the problem is that Alireza could just bring the bishop back to e8, and the fact that Black pins the knight. Really, you can't take on f7 because you drop the queen. So this could spiral out of control pretty darn fast. And I completely agree with you, Fiona. There's definitely something a little bit extra, as you said, when Magnus is playing Alireza, because he does want to make that statement. He wants to prove that no. The young guard might be good, but it'll take him a couple more years. So if Alireza can actually score a victory here, that would be an absolute sensation.
Yeah, in the first round of the tournament with the black pieces, that would be huge, huge, huge. But let's see. What's Magnus going to do here? I'd be so curious to know what Magnus's clock situation is. Unfortunately don't think we know.
Maybe get the queen out of the pin, honestly, because the sort of bane of White's existence seems to be the pin. So something like queen g4 occurred to me also. Well, the computer laughs at me as always, but this does seem like a pretty human move, get the queen out of the pin, and maybe try to go.
Why does the computer laugh at you though? What does the
I think want? I mean, maybe just bishop e8 honestly is the reason, and you know, for the computer, it just sees the 2 extra pawns, and then the knight on e5 creates the illusion that white has all this activity, but black's knight is going to travel back to f7, and once that e5 knight is dislodged, white just doesn't have much to show for the material deficit. So I don't know what Magnus is going to do, but that's where Magnus is Magnus. I think he'll find the best move here, whatever it is.
Let's come back to this one. Let's maybe quickly go back to last year's winner, Fabiano Caruana and Jordan van Foreest. We thought this might fizzle out into some kind of drawn rook ending.
It looks like Fabi has created
a white rook. How did that white rook get to AA?
So, okay, so we saw this and rook ACA. We predicted this. G5 by Van Foreest. So he's creating luft for the king. And while he's at it, he's trying to disrupt the coordination of white's pawn chain. He's trying to break up white's pawn chain. So technically it's a pawn sacrifice, but Fabi's not going to take here and create all these weaknesses. So Fabi goes b6. Fabi goes b6. Van Foreest goes rook c6. And now a check and quickly rook to a8. And counterattacking the a3 pawn. Van Foreest says, okay, I'm going to go after the a2 pawn instead. He probably intended rook c2 check. But Fabi's going to go to h3 with his king, potentially even to g4. And after rook takes a2, I would imagine that is something like, oh my lands, something like f5 could be very dangerous for black. This is an idea, and I don't know, something is giving me the shivers here in terms of Van Foreest's position. The timestamps would be really helpful because there's 4 more moves until time control.
They are there.
That's accurate. Okay. So 1 minute for Fabian. Okay, Van Foreest is, and then rook c2. Just so many subtleties, as you said. It's just I can't make any sense of this. So definitely Fabi in the driver's seat by this one. He's breathing a sigh of relief. But I think if Van Foreest defends accurately, he should be able to make a draw.
He's gone rook c2.
Okay.
And king h3.
I think we're about to see that any second. Yep.
And I'm curious, is your gonna allow the pawn to come to f5, or what's he?
Well, one funny idea that I thought of, it's a little superficial, is go h5. And I know this looks kind of dumb. Are you really trying to check maybe? Well, yes, I am, sir. So after rook takes a3, look at this line, check. And now you don't want to take here because of king g5, but after king h6, it's mate, inevitably. You can go h3, and after rook h2, the rook is so bad it can't check the black king. So I think that's actually a legitimate way to stop rook takes a3. The more I look at this, the more I like this move h5. Now, white doesn't have to get checkmated. White can take on g5. But as we discussed, that breaks up white's pawn chain. And I think already at this point, rook takes a2 comes a lot close to securing the draw. So I'm predicting h5.
Yeah, h5 looks good. I think it's important, as you mentioned, that Jordan, he has still 12 minutes on the clock, and he has just taken
Okay. Interesting. So he hasn't gone h5. Wow. Well, I don't know what... I guess that's also good. I mean, Fabi can't really take this way, right? I mean, then that e3 pawn is going to be very strong. Probably not that way, probably rook c3, but that's unthinkable. So gf is going to happen. And, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think this is somewhere in the ether between a draw and a win. I think Jordan will make the draw, though. So
yeah, I think here the players are focused on getting to move 40, and then they can, take a breather and do some serious calculation. Here it's hard for Fabiano, 1 minute on the clock, but even 12 minutes for Jordan isn't so much. But as you say, most likely draw, which would be a great result for Jordan to kick off this tournament. Shall we go back to, maybe Hare Krishna?
Just quick check-in, and this will be a draw. This is a dead draw.
Yeah, Maxime did well to survive this game. He was under pressure for most of it, but now without the queens on the board, there's not too much left to play for here. So let's move on. Let's go and see maybe Wojciech.
Wojciech, yeah, let's check. Oh, that's going to be a draw, I think, because they fizzled out. I mean, basically, we sort of predicted this. This is, Wojciech took on d5 here, and basically they had this massive exchange on b3. And yes, Wojciech wins a pawn, but this is a classic 4-on-3, which it's not that easy, but it is a draw. And basically, Anton reached an ideal pawn configuration. This diagonal pawn configuration is ideal for defensive purposes. And I've had this a million times. I mean, this really is a draw in the hands of a skilled player. They've traded a bunch more pawns. I mean, this is just unwinnable. White has some attempts. White can try to finagle his way into this, but by and large, and Anton has plenty of time, this should end in a draw, almost for certain.
Absolutely, yeah. So they are past move 40 already, which means they got their additional extra 50 minutes on the clock. And I agree with you. I would be absolutely shocked if this was anything but a draw. Do you want to go? Let's go back to Magnus.
Yeah, because stuff has happened here. And here the timestamps will be helpful. So Magnus has indeed gone rook b6. We mentioned this move. And Alireza responded with bishop e, and now queen e3. So Magnus does finally unpin his queen. And if you notice this move, queen e3, he didn't just put it on a random square. He is extraying this pawn on e6. So what he wants to do is he wants to kick away black's knight. Let's say black plays a4. Then after h4, for example, knight, maybe f4 is more accurate, but the bottom line is you want to go knight g4 and then win this pawn on e6 with a lot of very active counterplay. After queen h4, rook e6, you're actually threatening to capture on e8 and deliver checkmate, if you think about it, along the back rank. So this is, I would say, a critical position. We can see the computer giving a big advantage for black, but it's one thing to look at the eval. It's another thing. I'm pretty sure black has to probably find Fiona some sort of very accurate move. Maybe it's rook to b8. I don't know, but I don't envy Alireza. Do we have the timestamps for this game?
Unfortunately not. I'm super curious.
Yeah, that would be very defining, actually.
Maybe if we can just go to another screen for 1 second and update the browser very quickly to see if that changes anything.
Sure.
But
yeah.
I know that's the Fabiana.
Yeah, that would be more closer to the truth.
I got excited there for a second. No, unfortunately, we don't have the times.
We see Firouzja fidgeting, a little bit, back and forth slightly to his chair. It looks like our amazing team of producers. We actually just got
the information.
Look at them working hard. 1 minute for Magnus? Or is that 1 hour?
1 minute for Magnus against 3.5 for Alireza. Wow, thank you to our team behind the scenes.
Oh, this is Fiona Buck, as I say, seatbelts fastened and mandatory, in the words of.
What's your prediction, Dania?
I am going to, I believe in Alireza. I think that he's, he is the future of chess. But I have a bad feeling about what he's going to do in the next couple of moves. I'm going to have to go with the Magnus win here. And this is no disrespect to Alireza. I am the first to sing his praises, but I just feel like in these situations, it's that experience. How many times have you been in this time scramble situation? Now, Alireza lacks some of that. With that being said, he's been playing this very accurately so far. Let's buckle in and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that Mr. Huh? I think I'm gonna go with a draw. I'm gonna go with a draw in this game. Although I absolutely still think that all three results are completely possible. I saw that Mr. Gotham Chess was in the chat with us, and I had promised him we would get to this. Now it's probably not a good time because I know we're in the heat of the time control. But I had promised we would discuss if this tournament was a chess boxing tournament. Who do we think would win? I said I think it's very hard to argue against Magnus. Anyway, Alireza has pushed the a4 pawn.
Mm-hmm. And we did mention this possibility, right? Now, I sort of hinted at h4 being the response, but that's definitely not the move as we can see from the computer. And it appears to me that knight f7 is not the reason why. I think the reason why might actually be knight e4, intercepting white's defense of the e5 knight. So If you take with a pawn, then I take the knight. See, one way to think about this position is black is able to eliminate the knight. Then there's only so much that white can do. A lot of white's counterplay here is predicated on the use of this knight. So let's see how Magnus skirts that problem. Maybe he goes f4 here. I'm actually not sure.
I think
maybe f4 is the move.
G4.
So he first goes knight g4. That makes even more sense. He first gets the knight out of the picture. Then I think he'll follow up with h4. And I know some people are saying I'm out of my mind by predicting a Magnus win, but, you know, just give me a chance.
Well, Magnus, I mean, he's also under a minute with still 7 moves to play, so
right.
It's not exactly easy to navigate.
I'm nervous.
This position.
I feel my hands shaking just watching this. I mean, can you imagine sitting there, both Alireza and Magnus under a minute? Man, this brings back some memories, and under 30,000 people watching you. Time scramble. This is going to be fascinating. Let's see where Alireza puts the queen. There's a lot of squares here to consider. You can be active with queen c3, but that abandons the king, and I don't think that's a good idea. You could go queen f8. You could go queen e7. I don't envy this decision by Alireza. There's about 6 or 7 possible retreat squares, and a case could be made for all of them, Fiona. I have a feeling he has to be very accurate to preserve his advantage.
Yeah, and not just to preserve his advantage, but to make sure the advantage doesn't swing the other way. Because it is, for the moment, things are fine, but this is really a position where every mistake could end the game pretty much on the spot.
You could see him glancing at the clock, one time, another time, and then he glances at the clock, and then he gets ready to make a move. And queen d8, his move makes sense. He is threatening d4. That's a very, very nice idea, actually, because if Magnus just plays h4, I think Alireza's idea is d4. And that intercepts that queen in its defense of the rook. Magnus rook
Danny,
takes...
I think we had a big move.
Sacks the exchange on his own volition. What's the idea? The idea is as follows. Knight e6, queen e6. And if bishop f7, Magnus is going to plant his queen to f5, I think. And look at this battery that's built right aiming at that h7 square. This is going to come down right to the wire. Will Alireza be able to defend?
But we have to take the rook, right? What else?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine so. Because if you don't, that rook could go on to h6 and snap that pawn off too. But Alireza has to find something in that position. I realize the computer's still giving an advantage to black, but surely people can understand. And I do have one idea. I just came up with one idea just really quickly. In this position, you could give a check on b6 and maybe go bishop g6 and sacrifice that bishop. But if you think about it in this endgame, look at the snapper on a4. It could go to a3. These minor pieces are out of commission. That might be something to consider for Alireza.
The problem is that if you didn't see rook e6 coming, and you're met with this move, and Magnus seemed to play it very confidently. But look at, we saw for a second, we saw the clock time. So I think Magnus was on 50 seconds something, and Alireza only 30-something seconds.
Okay, so queen takes c6 has been played, and now I have a sense that this queen b6, bishop g6 idea might be the key. I have a feeling that that's the only defense, but it might be a very strong one. And hey, I'd be happy to be wrong regarding... Okay, bishop f7 played, and that looks like a blunder. Wait a minute, Fiona. I think knight takes h6 here. Doesn't knight h6 win the game for white? And look at this. Queen on h6. Bishop h7 is going to be a huge threat.
Oh, wow. And there he goes. Knight h6
instantly
is on the board.
And I guess I hate to have jinxed him, but, I've seen this happen before. And let me just show, let's watch what happens here. It looks like black's king. Look at black's king and look at white's 3 pieces surrounding the king. What's the key? Queen b6 is not possible anymore. That square is defended. And white's got a million threats here, ranging from bishop h7 to the rook lift to queen h7, and all of these lead to checkmate. Alireza, unfortunately, he's mishandled it in a bad way.
I mean, it's hard at first sight to even find a move to keep the game going.
Yeah, no, it's mate. I think the game is over. I mean, the computer says +3, so there's some defense here, but Alireza with a second, and he doesn't see anything. I'm looking at the camera right now.
So he played
It's
queen c7.
well, it's a mate. It's a mate. Bishop h7 should definitely be the move. King h8, bishop f5. I'm just trying to find the mate here myself, but I don't.
So where was this mate? It's mate in 6.
Yeah, so check is probably how this starts. It's actually not that easy. That's okay. That slows it down apparently. So maybe there's some sort of other move. Is it rook, queen h7?
I think Magnus reaching for the queen.
Yeah, queen
h7
h8, queen f6. Yes, no, queen h6. That's the mate. You get the queen to g7 and then whoop, swing the queen around and checkmate it on e7. That's the mate. And he's done
Very
it.
nice. And I think Magnus has figured it out.
He's figured it out.
Well.
I mean, that's just something Magnus eats for breakfast. Queen h8. There it is.
And now we see also, I think, Alireza's facial expression a second ago there also gave away that he has seen it as well. And
that is a heartbreaking first round for Alireza Firouzja. And you can see the frustration. And he goes, what does he do? Queen.
Yeah, I mean, chess is a cruel game. And there we see the resignation. No handshakes here in Vaikanze, but what a turnaround. Magnus Carlsen, but he took the game. He took the game to Alireza, giving up 1 pawn, 2 pawns, giving up the exchange, and finishing the game in style with checkmate about to appear on the board. What can I say? I mean, congratulations to Magnus, and what a way to start this tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, don't give me too much credit because part of the reason I've, tried to tell people to put this eval bar in context, put it in proper context, look at the position itself, look at the human chances in the position, and finding on-demand moves against an initiative when you've got a minute on the clock is very, very difficult. And just to show where we believe Alireza missed his biggest chance, this move, bishop f7, natural move, but a big blunder. Instead, if you move the king away, let's say to h8, then after queen f5, and this is what deterred Alireza, right? It looks like mate is unstoppable. But now you give a check, the king has to move, and now bishop g6, a very hard move to see. You sacrifice an entire bishop, but you do that in order to get into an endgame. And in this endgame, it turns out that these two pieces are very bad at stopping this pass pawn. The pawn goes to a2, and at the very least, black is not going to lose this game. Maybe white can coordinate his pieces in time to make a draw, but black is holding all of the cards here for sure. And heartbreaker, but Magnus strikes again. The world champion is the world champion for a reason.
Absolutely. Let's very quickly see. We're 2 minutes away from the first. Let's see if there's any game where we haven't made the time control yet. So let's maybe just quickly click through them and see if everyone has reached
so they
move 40. So these guys, Giri and Tari, have just made move 40.
Yeah, we'll see c3, d4 there, but wait to check. And that's been a while ago now. Hari Krishna and MBL also have reached move 40. That'll be a draw shortly. And Fabi.
And there's this one and Grandelius, the last one.
Yeah. Oh, they are actually okay. So let's take a look at. And Grandelius has just made it.
But huh?
Yeah, Grandelius has just made move 40.
Yeah.
And now it's up to Donchenko. But this looks grim. This looks grim indeed for Donchenko because if we look at these pawns, right? White's eventually going to take on e6. And I think he's going to drop it back to e5, and he's going to start snapping these pawns off the board. And these pawns are surprisingly solid. They're all defending each other. So it's going to take black a very long time to actually take them. So.
Yeah, so looking good for Niels. How is it looking for Monsieur Vachier-Lagrave? We saw him there just taking a sip of tea.
Monsieur Vachier-Lagrave, I think, will make the draw. After maybe the trade of bishops and the trade of rooks are there. And then he will reward himself with some baguette in the evening. But he's going to play, one idea here would be to play bishop c. I mean, Abiel just doesn't lose these kinds of positions. But I think bishop c3 would be one way to play, and then basically threaten the rook trade. And in the
I have
Mm-hmm.
one question. Why is this game still going on? Is one of the sides still, like, who's even still is White still pressing, or is
Oh, you mean in the MBL game?
yeah.
I think that White is technically still pressing. I mean, if you look just strictly at the computer, then you'll see plus 0.3, you know. But that's the kind of plus 0.3 that derives from the extra pawn and not really from anything substantive within the position. And basically, you know, and Black has such a strong bishop on e5, and that imitation, you know, by the way, I love MBL. He's an awesome person, and I had the honor of playing a tournament with him in Corsica, actually. And I remember on the very last day, there was a classical tournament, and then we all were driven to this very small town for a blitz tournament. And every morning in France, in Corsica, I would walk to the nearest bakery and just get a big baguette and a Perrier. And that baguette would be gone in 2 seconds. There's no baguette like there is in France or Corsica.
I actually remember that Blitz tournament well, because that was incidentally the first and maybe only time that I've ever met you in the flesh, face to face, and I interviewed both you and MVL during that Blitz tournament. So everything's going full circle. We meet again here in Vike. You're in Charlotte. We hear Maxime wet his baguette over the board. And yeah, it looks like this game is headed to a draw. I think what we're gonna do now is we have reached the time control in all the games, so we are going to take a short break, and after that we will be back with a special guest, so don't go anywhere, and we'll see you all very, very shortly.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to TATA Steil 2021, and it is an honor to be joined by a very special guest. Grandmaster Ivan Sokolov is joining us today. He is a legendary Grandmaster, top player, coach, author, with an incredible pedigree, who himself has lived in the Netherlands for many years and has played Wake and Z. I can't wait to interrogate you, Ivan. Thank you so much for joining the broadcast.
Thank you for this wonderful intro, Daniel. Go ahead.
Well, there's so much. Thank you. There's so much I'm curious about, but I guess a cliche question to start. How did you get into chess? What were the earliest steps that you remember, and what was your path like through the titles up to GM?
I guess, my story is a very boring one. I learned it from my father when I was like age of 6. My father was maybe 2,000 player in today's rating, maybe 2,100, something like this. And I played actually a lot of those tournaments, which was at that time tough because we had one country, which was Yugoslavia, which was one of the chess powers. At that time, you had Soviet Union, you had United States, Yugoslavia, and Hungary. That was about it, pretty much, in those years. So it was not easy, but and I had my doubts in my development at some moment to quit chess and to do something else. I guess for me, the breaking point was when I became a Grandmaster in 1987, which at that time was youngest in the world.
Wow.
I was 19, so nowadays, if you are a Grandmaster at the age of 19, you are not impressing anyone. But 33 years back, it was somewhat different.
That makes a lot of sense. And then did you immigrate to the Netherlands soon after that?
No, actually, my immigration to Netherlands was not, let's say, a matter of a choice. It was a matter of circumstances. Because we got this, let's say, sort of not amicable breakup of former Yugoslavia. And we had a war which lasted like 5-6 years. And I settled in the Netherlands once when war was over. I understood since I arrived to Netherlands as a young man, I was 23 years old, that this time has changed me and that I prefer to live in the West. This is more or less to make a long story short.
That's really interesting. And of course, that segues us into your experience in this very tournament in Wake on Z. And rumor even has it that you beat some amateur chess player named Gary Kasparov in 1999. Could you tell us a little bit about your experiences in Wake on Z, what it was like to play and, of course, to defeat Gary Kasparov in his prime?
It is actually quite funny, because in my life, I have won tournaments like Hastings when it was really strong event. I won Bill A, also kind of quite a serious tournament. I won Hoogeveen, where a lot of strong people played. But this one single win versus Kasparov brought me more fame than winning all these tournaments together. I guess because, there was a combination of effects. It was a good choice, opening choice, which paid off, which I couldn't know in advance. But it paid off because somehow Gary went into something which he was supposed to know very well, but he mixed up the line. And once he understood that he mixed up the line, he became a different player. Because, Gary, he likes to bully people with his preparation. I mean, he's a bully. That's the way it is. And when he finds himself on the other end, he's not a very good receiver. Let's say in boxing, I would say he's a soft chin. So I got a bit lucky with the preparation. And then once I sensed that he was bleeding, I kind of took my chance. At that time, it was kind of funny because at that time, we had different restrictions. So actually, people were talking during the game.
With
with
just spectators?
No, with other players.
Mhm.
So I went to pick up my coffee, and Peter Svidler told me, well, you know, Gary knows this line very well because it was invented by his former second. I said, you know, Peter, next time when he goes out to take a tea, tell him that it is correct, but he went with his king to a wrong side and he's likely to get mated. I don't know whether he told him this or not, but at that time we had different restrictions. It was different.
Wow, that's
and this is quite memorable to me, that kind of game, and kind of funny enough, really. I have won quite some number of traditional tournaments in my life, but once I almost won a Vaikanze. The reason why I actually didn't first win it alone was that I lost drawn ending to Salov, but then I could still catch up with him in the last round because he had the lost position versus Korchnoi. But Victor got so irritated that Salov kept on playing lost position versus him. Victor was quite famous for this, that actually he let it slip into queen versus rook, but problem is that rook side can build a fortress. And then I shared the second place. But nobody remembers that I almost won Vaikanze tournament. Everybody remembers that one single game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they missed the forest for the trees.
Yes.
That's so interesting. And I was just curious, sort of segueing us from your experiences in the late 90s. Of course, you've worked personally with a lot of the some of the top juniors right now. And I guess first a more general question, and then maybe we can get into some of the specifics if there's any stories you want to share, and then we'll transition to the games. But on a more general level, Ivan, do you notice sort of any sort of specific changes in the play style of the top players from the 90s to now? Of course, computers have completely revolutionized the game, but are there any sort of specific insights, anything that has surprised you in the way that top players approach the game, in the way that they prepare, in any way that they, in any of their relationship to the game?
One of the things which changed is that people are way more resilient when they get a lousy position. Or even lost position. It takes more energy to beat them. Let's say 30 years ago, people also kind of, let's say, tried to defend it, but once they realized that position was utterly hopeless, they were, I would not say ready to let it go, but they sort of accepted the outcome. And nowadays, when you're talking about the youngest or younger generation of top players, they are much better at refusing to die. They are much better at actually keeping their energy level high in order to look for the chances. This is, for example, a change which I definitely see, and this has, I think, nothing to do with the computers. It has to do with the mentality. That there is some certain mentality change which I see, and this makes actually automatically game tougher. Why? Because to bring your advantage home, to clinch it into a win, takes you more energy because your opponent is more resilient, right? So makes it actually harder. Other things that people are better prepared, okay, that they have these computer analyses, that they are more capable of remembering a lot of energy. He's a very sporty man, still at his best age, and he feels that he's able to push people to the limits. And I guess when somebody sits on the other side and understands, like, okay, this game is going to be played until the end. There is no kind of easy escape. And they do know that they play a person who is able to keep his energy and concentration level at the top until the very end of the game. Of course, it puts you sort of in a driving seat. And I think that he's doing it very well. That's
some very interesting insights. One more question before maybe we jump into, and I have your take on some of the games. You've worked with some of the top juniors right now, including Alireza, and certainly don't mean to pry. So whatever you share, we will be very grateful for. But could you maybe tell us a little bit about some of these experiences and what you've learned about these top players and who you think might go the furthest?
I did tip him as the potential world champion, and I think that I did not change my mind. I think that Magnus' attitude, well, cut his head before he grows, is smart, because he wants to build up psychological advantage, because he understands that one day he's going to face him under more serious circumstances, and why not to build this psychological advantage. Alireza is very serious about his game when it comes to studying this from different angles. And for example, I would not go into details, but I learned, let's say, from him about how does a younger generation view some, let's say, strategic truths differently, simply because computer is telling them that maybe truths are different than what people thought like 30 years ago. And some of those things are right. I did have some analysis with him that he would tell me something, and I would say, well, if this holds in this position, then I have to learn chess again. And he would say, yeah, but I analyze with this engine and it goes to this, this, and this, and okay. And then we would analyze, and I would say, all right, what can I say? Chess is, after all, concrete game. If you cannot prove it over the board, then the whole theory falls down the toilet. So this is interesting how the game is changing, and why do I think that he would go very far, is, for example, that he's not only focused on move-to-move preparation. Like, for example, he lost the game today, but what did he try to do? He achieved good version, I would say, position. Magnus was having some, I would not say problems, but he was not finding exactly the way how to handle a semi-Tarrasch. You can think about his game 1 year ago in Vaikanze versus Xiong, which did not go very well for him. If you remember this game, he pushed some g4 very early in the game, then he blundered a pawn, and he landed in ending, which he managed to hold, which was impossible to handle in today's game, because simply Alireza got better version of regular semi-Tarrasch. I guess he was probably tempi up. Normally you spend a tempi or 8. H6. Here, H6, bishop H4 was included, right?
Right, it was played on move 5.
Yes. While on the other hand, I did not see where did black lose a tempi in order to compensate for this. So I simply think that he got semi-Tarrasch with tempi up, maybe even more, but tempi up definitely. And I think this is the reason why Magnus went to this A-pawn push plan, which was very popular, I think 2 or 3 years ago. Everybody tried it versus Kramnik, and nobody managed to beat him, and then they gave up on this. Okay, then we got this typical middle game, right? I mean, he sacrificed this pawn.
Yeah, he sort of used the A-pawn as a decoy for white's pieces,
a decoy
and
for white.
F4.
And okay, this is because he took risks, definitely. And okay, fortune favors braves, you know.
Right.
Somehow today game is Magnus didn't want to. I was surprised that he took so much risk, because in a Vaikanze at least he's known as a slow starter. If you think about many Vaikanze tournaments which he won, he normally actually won them by beating people horribly in the second half, the first round, versus a player that, okay, psychological balance between two of them might play a greater role down the road.
That makes a lot of sense. That's very interesting insight. We also wanted to quickly get your take on maybe some of the other positions. We just see Hare Krishna and MVL drawing their game in a fortress.
Yeah.
But if we look at some of the more interesting positions, we see, first of all, Giri and Tarja. Anish has been trying to make progress in this position for ages now. What would you say his chances are?
I think that he will win the game, but he has to try to make a break at some stage. He needs to play some move like c3 and open up. I'm not sure. Let's say this rook, I do not see much of a point being on h1. I will place it somewhere else. And I don't know, for example, if I can place my knight to g1 so that your queen is maybe stuck controlling h3 square. Because if I manage to move a rook back to h1 and bring my knight to h3 so I can release both of my rooks, then I guess the game is pretty much over. If I can manage that. So I have to take care that when I play, let's say, when I move my rook from h1, I bring my knight to g1, and I'm ready to move my rook from h3 to be replaced by the knight, that I do not get stuck into something like h3 check.
Right.
Which in order to do, you need to be able, with the queen, either to have a queen already on a diagonal, or to play h3, rook h3, queen, I don't know, e6 or something like this, and not to be disturbed by my queen to chase you off. But this rook, I guess, from a h1, needs to go, because you're not gonna eat a pawn on h4, right?
Right.
And blockade which you have, you're having it anyway.
Right.
I mean, you don't really need this extra piece there to maintain it.
And rook b8 has been played, so it seems especially so that rook d1, for example, and c3.
Yeah.
You can start with that maybe, and then see where the knight is required.
I guess I guess that Anish will need to make this break with the c3. And it looks to me very logical to play indeed move like rook d1 and c3, and then indeed to figure out where is the knight required, because perhaps you can come up with a d4 and you do not need to move the knight. Maybe knight will be great hitting on f4. I don't know.
Right. I mean, for now, rook d1, c3 seems very flexible, and that queen on a6 seems to be signifying very serious progress made by Giri. So, yeah,
correct.
We'll definitely...
I think that Giri was quite smart to provoke c6, definitely. Because now, okay, black needs to worry about if he starts losing queen side, that would be it.
Right. Yeah.
I would be very surprised if Anish doesn't win this game.
That makes a lot of sense. And we also have, what are the interesting games? We have Grandelius against, it seems like Wojciech against Anton is a sure draw.
Yeah, this will be beautiful.
Fabi against Van Forest also looks like a 50-50 game. What is your take on Fabi's endgame?
Well, okay, my take is obviously, I mean, if somebody is having any chances to win, it is white. I do not see how can black get any chances.
Right.
But I would be quite surprised if, okay, hang on, what do I need to do? I need to put my king to f4. I'm gonna probably lose b6 in the process.
Right. Black can take it even now.
Yeah, I don't need to hurry to take on e4 because I can take it at any time. For the time being, this pawn is protecting me. I will go with my rook, let's say maybe to first rank or second rank, just to be more flexible. And then I want to play a move like f6 to ask you where you go with your king. And then to give you some check and try to hit you on your f7 pawn. And I guess this is the reason why Van Foreest just gave a check on G2, right?
Right, rook G2 trying to, but the rook could also come through A8 maybe, rook A8 and F6, and rook G8.
Maybe what Jordan wants to do, maybe he wants to, H5, yeah, because okay, King F4, H5, mate in 1, always good.
Oh wow!
Always a great threat.
That's pretty crazy, rook G4, mate.
Yeah, so I guess you gotta take on E4,
right?
And then H5.
H4,
yeah, I think he's looking for counterplay, and if he can keep this rook busy, then he's doing good.
Yeah, I mean, rook probably has to go to A1, and then he just, what does he get his pawn to H2, and then uses his rook to mop up some of the pawns that White has to give up when his king goes to G3.
Yeah, correct. And then I think it is easy draw.
And I've noticed also the young players and their endgame abilities. It's crazy how, how effortlessly this seems to come, like when to defend actively, when to defend passively for young players who, that Russian expression, with young players to the endgame, that doesn't seem to apply anymore.
I think that actually young players are more eager to embrace this strategy, which is normally good in endings active defense. I think that they're actually quite good embracing it, and now this is what Van Foreest is doing. I'm just wondering, can I maybe take on E4, and then when you push your pawn to H4 to play King F3, H3, Rook A4 to try to get to your pawn from behind?
What if I could try Rook G5 there?
Rook G5, yeah, then Rook G5 you're trying to disturb me. Yeah, this is kind of right, then it won't work. Because if I lose my F-pawn, even if I snatch your H, who cares?
Yeah, I'll go around for F2 to B2.
Yeah, this is... I think that it's a draw. I think that Van Foreest is going to make a draw.
Wow. Yeah, this H5 is a crucial idea.
Yeah, this crucial idea not to grab a pawn on B6, but to remain active.
Yeah, that's really cool. And the only other game, perhaps, that if I could get your take on is Grandelius Donchenko. That's a pawn end game, which seems actually very rich, but probably Grandelius is just winning.
Hang on, it looks like it. Okay, King F3 is a forced move, right?
Right, and now...
And then I need to force you to lose a move so that I can push G4.
Right. So maybe C4?
C4, yeah.
King G2?
King G2 or King F2, doesn't matter. And then you can simply, I guess, grab. No, hang on. What is a pawn race? There is no pawn race. You grab on H5, I grab on G3.
Right.
You push H4, I play King F4, you play King G6. Oh, no, there is a pawn race.
King G4, yeah.
I should avoid that. So I guess maybe I should push G4. What happens?
Or maybe push the pawn to B6 first, but probably G4 also is good.
Maybe just G4.
Yeah, so take, King F2.
Okay, King F2 he just played, so G4 if I push now, takes, King E3, yeah?
Yeah, here it seems like Black gets a good version of it, so...
and then what is a pawn race? F5, you take, I take, you
King
go
D3.
King D3, King E6. You get a good version, so I shouldn't do that. Maybe now I should push your pawn to B7, what you are suggesting. So let's say, no, but if I play C4, you're going to play move King D4, right?
In which position? I thought C4 move 44 before taking on H5.
Okay, now you want to start with C4.
Start with C4, B5. And then BC maybe.
So C4, let's say King
G2?
G2, let's say.
B5?
Yeah, B5. No, hang on. If you play move King G2, then maybe I can push G4 because I'm going to get a better version.
Right, so then takes everything King F2.
Yeah, takes everything. Maybe my better version doesn't count. No, King F2, it does count. King F2, King G5, King E3, King F6, King F4, take, King E4, King D7, King D4.
B5.
Yeah, and I should win.
Wow. That B5 is the crucial move there.
So that means that you have to, so c4, you gotta, let's say, stick king f3, b5, king f2 back.
Right.
So now, if I want to push, I better do it, right?
Right, so
because
G4.
I will run out of 10 pieces. So G4, take, king E3.
Right. But now king G5, I think.
King G5.
You have to stick to the pawn, so king E4.
King E4, I'm going to stick to the pawn, that's right. King F6,
it's just
yeah,
over.
this is winning. Takes, move, king D6, king D4, B5, king moves, B6, and I win. And king C7,
Right.
and you're going to run out of 10 pieces.
Yeah, or you can play b5 beforehand and move 45. I think either wins. So,
yep.
Wow, that's really interesting. The interplay on the other side of the board. He's gone g4. So he's done it immediately. I guess he can. Okay.
Why did he play so fast? He has 40 minutes.
Right. Well, maybe I spoke too soon about endgame, but still should be winning. So take stakes.
Okay, this is now forced.
And king e3, right?
Yeah, king e3.
Maybe c4 there? No.
No, but c4, then I can even maybe play king d4.
Right. So king g5, I guess?
King g5 is probably forced. King g5.
And king e4.
King e4, I'm going to stick to a pawn.
But now c4, I think.
Then c4, yeah. Then c4 and you win.
Yeah, and b5 and then king f6. That line we looked at.
Yeah, and if you play e5, f5. Yeah, and then you simply win.
That's a pretty narrow margin, though. That's some fast calculation.
It's fast calculation, yeah.
Final thoughts that you have on the way that you're seeing round one and maybe your reflections in general on over-the-board chess and its return.
Well, I hope that over-the-board chess is going to return because we have seen many of those online events.
Mm-hmm.
And what is, of course, a problem with online events is that this Magnus Tour was fantastic. And is fantastic because I guess it is still going on. But the problem is that on a little bit of a lower scale, I do not see, maybe I'm wrong, but I do not see how can any kind of algorithm prevent intelligence cheating. Mm-hmm. I simply do not, see it. It is very easy to catch somebody who is a weak player, but somebody who is already a good player and who needs maybe assistance only twice or something like this. This intelligent cheating, I do not exactly see how is it possible to prevent. And while nothing of this applies to very top echelons, so the people who are, let's say, playing Magnus Tour, you have a lot of other events. And a lot of controversies, which I do not see going away. And or finding some genius algorithm that is going to somehow stop it. And therefore, I'm actually quite happy that real chess is coming back, and I hope that we're gonna get freedom of movement, freedom of travel, and that that indeed, like 3-4 months from now, this COVID-19 situation is solved.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but Grandelius has indeed won, as we predicted, simply resignation.
Yes, very good.
Bye. So
we will see now, I'm curious about this Vaikanze, because look, Vaikanze, I know from experience, has been a rough tournament, because at some moment when things are not going your way, you see rain and no sun and the wind, and the whole situation is not really cheering you up. And now there are also no people around. Everything is kind of closed, the reports which I'm getting. So that means that if somebody gets a tough time, might be a difficult tournament for that kind of person. So we're going to see how are people going to cope with if they, let's say, end into a tunnel, losing 2 or 3 games in a row. How they're going to get out of it, because it was in the Vaikanze always a problem. problem for a lot of people.
Right.
And I'm now curious how this one is going to end. And also, I was just wondering, you probably did some statistics. You have more players from a sub-top in this Svike than it usually was. So what is exactly expected score of Magnus? Is it more than 80% or something insane?
That would be an interesting thing to calculate. We haven't calculated it, but I would imagine something like 75% maybe.
Yeah, he needs some crazy score.
Right. Yeah, that'll be a very tall order for him, but we'll definitely see if he's up to the task.
Okay, we see how it's gonna work out. Thanks a lot for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Well, pleasure's all mine. It's a huge honor, Grandmaster Ivan Sokolov. Thank you so much for making time. It really is an honor.
Thank you, Daniel.
We hope to have you again on pretty soon. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks. Cheers. Thank you, Daniel. You too.
All right. Bye, Ivan. And we will go on a very small break. When we return, the final stage of action in Tata Steil 2021. We will be right back.
Hello and welcome back to these final stages of the first round of the Tata Steil chess tournament. Dania, we've had a few results, only 3 games remain, but we're going to start by recapping what were the pairings today, who came up against who, and then, of course, we have the interview with Magnus, which is ready for you. So let's have a look. Today, this game is still ongoing. Fabiano Caruana against Jordan. Esipenko against Duda ended in a draw. Anish Giri seems to be in a winning position against Aryan Tari. Niels Grandelius has just beaten Alexander Donchenko. Hari Krishna against MVL ended in a draw. Wojtaszek against David Anton, they are still playing, likely to be a draw, and of course the big clash of the day in which Magnus Carlsen defeated Alireza. So let's hear what Magnus had to say. So let's hear what you have to say about that, Dania.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was a game of twists and turns, and we heard Grandmaster Ivan Sokolov with some incredible insights into Alireza's mentality, into Magnus's mentality, and he mentioned that Magnus senses that Alireza is the future, and you call this, Fiona, as well, that he's maybe trying to take more risks than usual for a stage of the tournament so early. And well, in the end, it paid off. I mean, he sacks 2 pawns. He gets a position that's on the cusp of actually almost being lost, but he puts enough pressure on Alireza, who gets into time pressure, who gets nervous, and Magnus pounces mercilessly. He gets this one chance, and boom goes the dynamite. He takes on h6, and he mounts a crushing attack at the end. So definitely a heartbreaker for Alireza, but certainly there is stuff to look up to, and I think Alireza's in for a great tournament. He's clearly in good form, despite the loss.
Absolutely, and apparently, so the interview is ready now, so let's go to that and let's hear it from Magnus.
Congratulations.
Sounds
you
great.
Must feel some sense of relief.
Yeah, I was a typical first round game, to be fair. Thinking too much and miscalculating. I understood that what I did was probably not correct, but I thought I would have some decent chances. And then at some point I'd almost given up because I thought it was not working. And then suddenly, I don't know if a4 was a huge mistake, but at any event, it's unbelievably impractical. And I think that was the problem there. That if there's something forced there for him, then it's impossible to calculate with so little time. And instead he blundered, which was very fortunate for me, of course. But overall, I think neither of us are especially happy, but it's a start, and at least there's in this tournament no first few rounds with boring draws like last year, and 7 first games were drawn. I'd happily take this instead.
Yes, of course, but was there a specific moment that you decided to gamble?
I would say already when I played d5 and sacked the pawn instead of, for instance, repeating moves, that was already a gamble. I felt like I would have decent compensation, but it was sort of a trend, that I knew in my heart that once I'd taken that decision, I wasn't going to back down later on and look for equality. So I knew at that point that at least mentally I'd already burned some bridges.
Okay. Last question. You arrived late yesterday. Did you feel fit during the game?
I definitely felt okay, and I think the shaky play has more to do with the fact that it's the first round and there's been very little classical at all recently.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And there we hear it from Magnus, who was well aware, by the sound of it, that he was taking some risk today. Dania, maybe we can very quickly bring up the board
Sure.
of Magnus's game and just go back to this a4 moment that he mentioned in the interview.
Yeah, and so did Ivan Sokolov. This a4, a5 idea, it's sort of a typical idea, and it really unbalances the position, right? It creates a weakness on a7, which he mercilessly piled up on. And Alireza found a very effective countermeasure against that, deploying his queen to f4. He goes a6 and then queen f4. And then the fireworks begin, really, as Magnus first trying to finagle his way into trapping Black's queen and failing that, sacrificing one pawn to carve out one square and then another to carve out another. And while it wasn't entirely sound, Magnus, humble as usual, but we know the kind of magic that he is capable of, and he pulled some of this magic today once again.
Yeah, and he pinpointed actually the moment where Alireza played a4 on move 32. He said he wasn't sure if it was a mistake, but I think he dubbed it highly impractical. And yeah, shortly after that, things fell apart when Alireza missed this knight takes h6 shot, which just put an immediate end to the game here after bishop f7. So kudos to Magnus, who seems in high spirits. He said despite only arriving yesterday, he felt in good shape today during the game. He has, in fact, we're being told, he started his last 7 TATA Steil chess tournaments with a draw, so he's off to a great start today, and we're looking forward to having him back tomorrow.
Definitely, and he's had a rough stretch recently. He's had his ups and downs, but what a champion does is they're able to compartmentalize and they're able to section off their losses and come to a tournament and start from a clean slate, and that's exactly what he's been able to do here. I think Alireza is going to be capable of much the same thing. He's going to start tomorrow much like a new tournament, and I'm very excited to see, and Ivan mentioned this, how these players will react
Yeah, 90% tactics.
to a loss.
While strategy
will
is
they
your long-term
ride
plan in
the
a
wave
game,
of success?
tactics are a set
All
of moves to gain a
psychological
quick win, like a
subcomponents are so
material or a
big.
positional
But what else is
advantage.
interesting
In
is the
this
rest of the
video,
game,
I
so
will
let's
show
jump
you
into
all the
those.
major tactics.
Some of them are about to conclude.
Yeah,
So we have Wojciech against
Even when I was last here an hour ago, it looked like it was heading for draw. Wojciech has pushed his pawn. One pawn has reached the 6th rank, but probably not going to get much further than that.
Yeah, and well, double go king b3 because the rook b1 wins the rook. Don't worry, Wojciech will repeat moves. I think. Now, here's the problem, and optically, you see the pawn on e6, a protected passer. The problem is the rook is in the ideal place, paradise found. The rook is behind the king and delivering these side checks, these back checks to the king. The king has simply nowhere to hide. If the king starts escaping, let's say to b6, the moment it gets to b6, you can keep checking the king. You could also just go rook f1. And in order to protect these pawns, the king has to go back. And now you keep checking. So it doesn't matter where the king goes, the rook will continue to check. And then when the king gets sufficiently far from the pawn, the rook returns to f1 and forces the king back in order to defend the pawn. I think this will end in a draw any second now, most likely. And Wojciech is already repeating moves. There is a mutual understanding that these players know how to draw these types of positions. That will be the next game to end.
Maybe if we get the camera up, we'll be just in time to see the handshake. I guess it is, as you say, imminent. So let's see. Can we catch it?
Yeah, that would be. I always like to see the games then.
Oh, we're too late. We are too late. We see one of the arbiters there who's now going to proceed, I think, to disinfect the pieces. No, not yet, but the pieces will be, of course, disinfected before tomorrow's game. That means we only have 2 games remaining. Anish against Arjan Tari and Fabiano Caruana against Jordan van Foreest.
Right, and we can start with the Giri game, which I think this game will end pretty soon as well. And Anish has managed to make a tremendous amount of progress to the point where Arjan's position is simply on the verge of collapsing, which I should add is not necessarily clear immediately. But if you look a little bit deeper at this position, it becomes clear that Black's position is simply resignable. It's over. Why is that? Now let's make a random move for Black. First of all, it's very hard to make a random move. It's almost Zugzwang, Fiona, because if you move the queen away, well, guess what? You drop the pawn. If you move the queen on f6 up, you drop the rook. If you move the rook up, you allow queen b7, and now the c6 pawn is lost. Now, you actually called something, which is that eventually Anish was able to provoke this move c6. And I actually think that was a big mistake by Arjan. He got a little bit impatient. The move c6 weakened b6. It doesn't seem significant, but Anish managed to infiltrate with his queen to a6. And I think that finally, queen e8, and finally, if you move the bishop, let's say to, if you move it to g5, you drop e5. If you move it to g7, there's a beautiful move. Knight takes f4, check, takes, and checkmate to His Majesty. Black is simply in Zugzwang here, Fiona. I don't see a single move.
Yes, a nice technique there. Sorry?
And I would say neither does Arjan. He's gone queen c8.
Yeah, he has, just as you said it, he played queen c8.
Yeah, I mean, rook h4, I
think. Queen c8, yeah, it's just dropping the h-pawn.
And I guess he wants to go, well, first of all, rook a8 does not trap the queen. Queen is a nice little square on e7, and neither does rook b7. You can just go queen a6, evacuate through c4, and with this h-file open, the game is over. White gets this avenue toward Black's king. That's probably not even the fastest, but that definitely wins the game very convincingly.
Absolutely, and yeah, I mean some impressive technique here by Anish, who made it seem in the end effortless. But as you said, maybe helped by the C6 push from Arian. Let's see the last game that is still ongoing.
Yeah.
That is Fabiano Caruana and his rook ending against Jordan van Foreest.
Yeah,
And Fabiano, he
Ivan
is up
did
his pawn still, but
yeah, but look at this monster on h3, and that is what probably will enable Jordan to make the draw here. It's that pawn which ties down White's rook. And the essential question is, can White restrain and then pick up this pawn without giving up two of his own pawns? I think the answer is no. And, you know, when the computer evaluates an endgame like this with a 0.8, that generally means it's a draw. You know, it's either winning or it's drawn. There is no real in between. For example, if White goes rook h1, we analyze this with Ivan, and then king f3, and he says, I'm going to go to g3, I'm going to snap up that pawn. Before you know, well, no, rook b2 happens. And if king to g3, then you can go rook to b5, attacking this pawn, right? And if White takes, then Black takes this pawn, attacking f5. White defends f5, and Black simply returns to b5, captures the last that pawn on b6, and makes a draw. So that's just one of many lines. I do think that Jordan is going to make the draw here. h5 was a very precise defensive resource.
There's also another indicator that this game is very likely to end in a draw. It's that Fabiano has already spent 45 minutes after the time control. And if in that time he hasn't found the winner, it's just unlikely to be there, I guess.
Yeah, you know, there's that rule you hear about thinking for 15 minutes or longer. It's sort of a diminishing returns kind of thing. If you don't see anything, you know, within the first period of thinking, then chances are he's trying to find, you know, maybe some trick. I don't even see a trick. Black's play is so straightforward. He wants to push the pawn to h2 and get the rook to b2, and there's no way to stop either of these things from happening. I think a draw is pretty much forthcoming.
Yeah. So let's go back to Anish and see if he has taken the h pawn, or is he's still considering his options. What else could he be thinking about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the alternative is I think bishop takes c5. That I was flirting with this idea, and you basically try to do the same thing, but you keep both rooks on the h file. And, you know, the reason behind that goes without saying. So this is completely winning for White. For example, the bishop now has to move because it's attacked, and after the bishop moves, the fastest mate is check, check, and then goodbye to the king. Another mate like is that after bishop takes c5, Black can go rook b7, intermediate move, get out of here. Okay, I'm out of here. But now after rook takes c5, rook h4, bishop g5, there is no immediate. There used to be a check on h7. It is still, I believe, completely winning after something like rook h7, or you can even play knight takes f4 check. Just take all of White's pawn. Mm-hmm.
What if I go rook h8?
Rook h8. Yeah, that's even faster. No, I agree. Rook h8 is the best for sure. Yeah, forces the queen out, and then maybe like queen a8. Just go here.
Yeah, that king is not gonna survive for long.
Yeah, I think it's a many roads lead to Rome kind of thing, and Anish is deciding between these two moves. Since he's thinking for that long, he's probably going to take on e5, finish it in style. But we'll see. So
I think there is a good chance. And if he wins, that means we will have three winners. 3 winners today, is that correct?
That sounds
so we have so far Magnus Carlsen, Niels Grandelius, and he would join these two players. And tomorrow I'm just taking a quick look, see if any of these players are matched up by any chance. Now tomorrow Magnus will be black against David Anton. Anish Giri, actually, that's one that I'm looking forward to. He will be black against Jordan van Foreest, so we'll have the all Dutch clash nice and early. And Niels Grandelius will be black against Duda.
And speaking of Niels Grandelius, a winner today, and we have for you his thoughts on today's game. Let's listen in.
Niels, a very good day for Sweden and Scandinavia, I guess. Can you tell me something about the game?
Yeah, well, he surprised me a lot in the early middle game when he played d5, breaking open the center. After that, it was very, very complicated. But originally, I had thought that I would have something very good. But then I started to calculate more deeply after he played it, and in all the lines, there was one more move that I had missed in the end, and everywhere it seemed that he's barely surviving. And the thing is, if he survives, then he might just be completely fine. So I was looking, burning all my time, and suddenly with 10 minutes left, I decided just to play a relatively equal position, which was not the intention. But then he got a bit, he was not that precise in the ending, and suddenly I got the pawn up in a rook ending, still must be a draw. But at least it's possible to go wrong for black, and I can put some pressure. And then he made another blunder with the move rook d2, missing this idea of rook e1 check. So after that, probably it's winning.
Yeah, because the pawn ending in the end was dead lost, yeah?
Pawn ending was dead lost, yeah. This was my my hope. But on the other hand, if he doesn't go for it, then I should be quite ahead in the race as well. So.
Okay, so what are your expectations for the tournament now?
I mean, nothing has changed. Yeah, I'm taking one game at a time, and I will try to play some good chess. Today was not that great, but definitely also not a disaster. So I'm reasonably content.
Yeah, but the point is very sweet.
The point is very, very sweet, but it's so early, so I'm mainly looking what is the quality, and well, can always be better, but not as bad as I feared.
Okay, thank you and good luck.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And we are back, but we just missed the resignation there by Aryan Tawi. And Anish starts the tournament with a win. Congratulations to the Dutchman.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Dania, what did you make of the game?
He chose a third method. He got his queen to e7, which probably is actually the fastest. And after bishop f8, we talked about opening up one of these pieces, and he plays knight takes f4, a very pretty move, and that finishes the game on the spot, because after e takes f4, queen f6 check, that is a devastating check for many reasons, and you can give a check on h8. I'm sure that leads to a mate, and this leads to an even faster mate, opening up the h file, and the king is absolute toast. If the queen was gone from the board, maybe the position would be unclear. So this is going to be forced checkmate, and so Aryan resigned after knight takes f4 check, and a huge win for Anish, who really, I mean, he got a good position early. Aryan didn't get enough compensation for the piece, but the resilience and the grit and the ability to provoke small weaknesses and then capitalize with filigree precision, that is such a unique quality to these top players. And Giri jumping out with 1 point, that is a big win to start the tournament for him, Fiona.
Yeah, and 3 years ago, Anish Giri actually tied for first with Magnus Carlsen. He then went on to lose the playoff. But what do you think, Anish? How do you see Anish's chances of winning the tournament this year?
I mean, I think he's clearly come prepared with fresh ideas. I think he does get this reputation, and we like to joke about it, about, Anish draws a lot of games and stuff. And I think that's a fair criticism to level in some regard, but I think he gets unfairly criticized in many other ways, because Anish is a lot more combative than some people realize. He's an absolute machine at beating people under 2,700 if you look at his games. And, he is very solid. He does take perhaps less risk than some of his other super grandmaster compatriots, but that doesn't mean he's not capable of winning a tournament. It doesn't mean he's not capable of stringing together a series of wins. He is over 2,750, and there's a very good reason for that. I actually think he's going to be a contender for winning the tournament this year.
Some interesting take, but yeah, I completely agree with you on everything, on the unfair draw takes, but also on how prepared he's come into this tournament. And we saw him just there end his post-mortem with Aryan Tari and getting off from the board, which means that only one game remains. Indeed. It is this weekending between Fabiano and Jordan, where we've had a couple more moves.
Yeah, and we sort of, as we anticipated, that pawn has been pushed all the way to h2. So here we analyze rook to b5. Now, there's a key. You might ask, well, why not take on b6 with the rook? Why not take this pawn? Now, the problem here is that white is able to retain this very nasty little pawn mass, and this is no good. I mean, now these pawns start advancing. You have to take the bull by the horns, and you have to get this key pawn on e5, and I think you do that by playing rook b5. If white defends it with king f4, then whoop, you come back to b2, and white can't have his cake and eat it too. Either he comes back to g3 and wins the pawn, or he doesn't make any progress. You can go e4, but that doesn't really help. I think black can probably just go rook g2, and you know, again, as soon as the king goes to g3 in any of these positions, whoop, rook to b5, takes e5, and then back to b5, winning the pawn on b6. So I'm quite sure that it's a dead draw here. I think Jordan taking his time maturely, but he will find rook b5.
Yeah, so you think this is the last key moment where we need just one precise move from Jordan?
Yep, and you might say, well, why isn't he moving? You know, he's got 26 minutes. There's no reason not to take a couple of them, and you're playing Fabi Caruana. I mean, that's not someone who you want to mess around with, and it's someone who will find any little chance. So
yeah. Let me throw in another couple of. Let me try to find some losing lines while we wait for Jordan to make his move. So how would you meet rook b3?
Okay, so rook b3, I would meet with rook takes h2, I think. And after rook takes e3, it's a fork, but I go king f4 and I unfork the pawn and the king. You can go back to b3. And this may look on the surface similar to the other position because you technically will win the pawn, but you'll do it at the cost of allowing white tremendous activity. For example, f6 check, king f8 gets mated, so king g8 is forced. And now rook c2, I think. Rook takes b6, and now very typical technique. Check, whoop, rook f8, king g6, rook g8, and now rook g7 wins the pawn on f7. So I went really fast to that line, but the bottom line is this gives white all of this activity. And rook b5. So
share your answers in the comments and also mention the tactics that can be used. All the best, guys. Let's see how many of you can solve this. But don't forget to like this video, and if you haven't yet subscribed, then subscribe now. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you in my next video.